When he first came, he went on a surf lesson with other members, and unfortunately, just a basic surf lesson, he was in bed for about a week.
Luigi Mangione's real manifesto has been released online. Now, I put manifesto in quotes because it is more of a note or a blog post than a manifesto. And I say real because there was a fake one floating around for some reason. I'm not sure why you would write a fake manifesto for somebody else, but whether it was AI or a person wrote that, that was around. But here's a real one. I'm going to read through it all. I'm also going to get to how CNN reacted to it, which I found a little interesting, as well as more context around what was happening in Luigi Mangione's life prior to doing what he did, including a couple of clips from close friends. So, first, this is a clip of Luigi Mangione being transported from a police car to a building. This was released by Ken Klippenstein, who also released the manifesto. I'll get to more on that in a second. But this is just worth playing here.
And it's completely out of touch. And it's an insult to the intelligence of the American people and to lived experience.
So in case you missed that, he's quoted as saying here, this is completely out of touch and an insult to the intelligence of the American people. I think he also sounds like he goes on to say, and their lived experience. I assume he's talking about their experience with the healthcare industry. But here is the so-called manifesto, again, shared by Ken Klippenstein. He is an independent journalist. He used to work for The Intercept. He is now on Substack. I will link to a Substack below the video in under sources on YouTube in case you want to support him. Ken has been doing fantastic work on his own, and it goes to show like this was not released by major media outlets despite them having access to this. So Ken writes here, I've obtained a copy of suspected killer Luigi Mangione's manifesto, the real one, not the forgery circulating online. Major media outlets are also in possession of the document but have refused to publish it and not even articulated a reason why. My queries to the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, and NBC to explain the rationale for withholding the manifesto while gladly quoting from it selectively have not been answered. I'll have more to say on this later, on how unhealthy the media's drift away from public discourse is. But for now, here's the manifesto. So I'll have more to say on this as well in a second. But here is what it says. Again, more of a blog post or a note, but he says to the feds, I'll keep this short, but I do respect what you do for our country. To save you a lengthy investigation, I state plainly that I wasn't working with anyone. This was fairly trivial, some elementary social engineering, basic CAD, a lot of patience. The spiral notebook, if present, has some straggling notes and to-do lists that illuminate the gist of it. My tech is pretty locked down because I work in engineering, so probably not much info there. I do apologize for any strife of traumas, but it had to be done. Frankly, these parasites simply had it coming. A reminder, the US has the #1 most expensive healthcare system in the world, yet we rank roughly number 42 in life expectancy. United is the largest company in the US by market cap, behind only Apple, Google, Walmart. It has grown and grown, but as our life expectancy, uh, no, the reality is it says indecipherable. I imagine maybe it's at corporations or something like that. But these indecipherable have simply gotten too powerful, and they continue to abuse our country for immense profit because the American public has allowed them to get away with it. Obviously, the problem is more complex, but I do not have space, and frankly, I do not pretend to be the most qualified person to lay out the full argument. But many have illuminated the corruption and greed, e.g., Rosenthal, Moore, decades ago, and the problems simply remain. It is not an issue of awareness at this point, but clearly power games at play. Evidently, I'm the first to face it with such brutal honesty. All right. So, motivations, I think, are clear. His issues with the healthcare industry. Some are quoting saying Moore is likely referring to Michael Moore. Documentary Sicko discusses the insane American healthcare, for-profit healthcare system. Again, just to reiterate, eliminating a CEO is not going to solve the healthcare problem. That is a systemic problem that needs to be solved through policy. And a big issue there is the amount of money that lobbyists from the healthcare industry pour into the US government as a way to continue making it a for-profit system. So the obvious move here is to move to a single payer Medicare for all system that's been discussed countless times. The political will has to be there, and people of all politics need to align on that, and I think there is an alignment on that, but there has to be a real movement towards that system. Otherwise, people are going to continue being screwed by a for-profit healthcare system. That said, as New Republic writes, the reality of the U.S. healthcare system is somehow even more grim than Mangione described. The U.S. was ranked 60th in the world for life expectancy per the most recent data from 2021, according to the U.S. News and World Report. And among its wealthy peer group in the OECD, the U.S. is ranked 30 out of 38. The U.S. does have the most expensive healthcare system in the world. Healthcare costs in the U.S. tallied up to an average of $12,318 per person in 2021, while in Germany, which has the second most expensive system, costs amounted to an average of $7,383 per person, according to the World Economic Forum. And I've discussed a lot of these issues in the past in videos this week, but also, during 2016 election, during the 2020 election, when Bernie was really discussing Medicare for all. I've discussed my experience with the single payer system in Canada, and just, even with the problems that universal systems have, it's never because of a lack of private healthcare or a lack of for-profit healthcare. It's usually, if there are issues in our systems, and of course there are, it's always because of the encroachment of for-profit companies, or the encroachment of people that want to bring a for-profit healthcare into universal systems. It's always the issue with that, as opposed to anything else, or underfunding when it comes to not paying nurses enough, for example. I know Ontario has gone through that in Canada. So there is, of course, issues with every healthcare system, but the benefits. I would take the Canadian healthcare system any day over what Americans have to deal with. Just when it comes to peace of mind when it comes to job security, not having to worry about losing healthcare if I lose my job, or having to switch doctors or switch healthcare plans if I lose my job, being able to go independent and self-employed because I have healthcare guaranteed to me and guaranteed to my family. Like, that alone is worth it. Let alone the fact that there was no in-network, out-of-network, the fact that I could go to any walk-in clinic and get help, the fact that I've had surgery and it was a very simple process. I just went, I was put under, got the surgery, I went home. There was no discussions ever with any insurance company. Nothing of the sort. Is just guaranteed to me, just paid for, because it's paid through taxes, and you pay less overall through your taxes than you would to private insurance, because again, there is no for-profit motive at the heart of that, and everybody's paying into the same system. I could talk at length about the benefits of a single-payer healthcare system, and that's just somebody as a civilian. I'm not even an expert in the field, but as somebody that experiences healthcare and understands how it operates here, at least the basics of it, it is clearly a much better system than what Americans unfortunately have to deal with. Now, I want to share CNN's reaction to the manifesto. Again, as far as I know, so at least so far, or at least as of last night, they hadn't yet read the full manifesto. But this is the reaction that CNN had.
Brianna, it's very disturbing, and those types of outbursts will certainly be evaluated by his defense team, because that's just not normal. I mean, we've already had reports that he has been very strange since over the summer, that he has become reclusive. This manifesto is these rantings and ravings of an individual that obviously has some aberrant thoughts in his mind, and that's why he put it down on paper.
Ranting and ravings that they are not willing to share with their audience. This gets to the heart of why a lot of people don't trust mainstream press. As I said in the last video, it's very easy to thread this needle. You can discuss how vigilante justice, how eliminating a CEO is not the solution to the healthcare problem, while also acknowledging that the issues that he is bringing up in, again, Manifesto, in this blog post, are legitimate. The fact that how the U.S. is ranked in the healthcare system is real. That is a real problem. So you can do both. You can acknowledge, hey, this is not the solution to fixing the problem, and also acknowledge that the healthcare system is a problem. But to not tell the audience what is in the manifesto, just to selectively pick out certain things and not acknowledge some of what he's saying here, it does a disservice to the audience and treats people like morons. People know what they have experienced with the healthcare system. I think it makes total sense to speak to that. If anything, it it further helps to ground people if you discuss those issues while also being honest and open with the obvious fact that what he did is not the solution to the problem. But they aren't willing to have that. Instead, it's been a lot of scolding and a lot of just uh, making this out to be just this crazy lunatic who did this thing with no real motivations. And you look at what the motivations are. You look at the data that he outlined, which is not dissimilar to what people like Bernie Sanders have been discussing. It's There are real problems that people feel that, of course, again, are not solved by what he did, but it helps to acknowledge what those problems are when discussing this topic, this event. Now, I want to get to some of what was discussed there as well in terms of how he sort of lost touch with people over the past few months. It does seem like there was at some point some kind of potential mental break over the last few months, as his family had or his mother had reported him missing to authorities. She hadn't had contact with him since July. Now, of course, he's an adult. He's living on his own, but to not have contact with your son for months, clearly they were worried about him. But this clip here, so this is from a friend of his when he was living in Hawaii, and I thought this was worth noting.
Yeah, so when I first interviewed him before he moved in, I remember he said he had a back issue and he was hoping to get stronger in Hawaii. So he's always focused on trying. When he first came, he went on a surf lesson with other members, and unfortunately, just a basic surf lesson, he was in bed for about a week. We had to get a different bed for him that was more firm, and I know it was really traumatic and difficult. When you're in your early 20s and you can't, do some basic things, it can be really, really difficult.
Did he have any conversations with you then or even afterwards about that issue? And I mean, his back, how he hurt it? I mean, obviously anything to do with the insurance process of it?
The only thing he ever mentioned, he mentioned, I need to go back to see my doctor and then I'm going to have surgery. I encouraged him and brought him to yoga classes. He would do calisthenics on his own. I know he was really focused on being strong and healthy, but it also weighed on him that he knew that there was an impending surgery.
All right, a couple of things worth noting there. He was out for a week over a basic surfing lesson. When you're 26, that in shape, and you have serious health issues like the one he had with his back, that can really weigh on somebody. I can't imagine being in that position. Obviously, that doesn't, again, I got to keep being clear because people get dumb. That doesn't excuse what he did. Obviously, thousands of people, millions of people go through serious, constant, health problems and don't lash out the way he did. But it's simply to try and understand the mindset that he was in, and what he was going through. Also worth noting, he is 26. I know in the US you can be on your parents' healthcare plan until you turn 26. Again, I'm not sure what his health insurance situation was, but he did end up getting the back surgery. There's the image on his Twitter profile banner that I showed in my initial video on Mangione. But there's also this from the LA Times. They write here, post from a since deleted Reddit account. The details matching Mangione's university, health condition, age, and college major indicate that the Reddit user suffered from a condition in which a vertebrae in the spine, usually in the lower back, slips out of place. The Reddit user wrote that his condition got worse after a surfing accident. Quote, my back and hips locked up after the accident. The Reddit user wrote in July 2023, I'm terrified of the implications. The Reddit user said he underwent spinal surgery weeks later, which appeared to have improved his symptoms. Mangione also posted an image of the spinal fusion surgery as the banner for his X account. So again, details keep coming out. It's unclear what the situation of his health was at the time that he did what he did, but it goes to just the lived experience that a lot of people share in terms of the healthcare industry and serious problems that are beyond their control. This is why, a lot of people, if you poll Americans on their private health insurance, a lot of people say they like their insurance, but a lot of those people haven't had to use it. If you poll people, those same Americans, on do you like your insurance, if they've actually had to use it, that number goes way down. because then they actually experience the healthcare system. It's something that you don't have to think about until you need it. And then you have to think about it. And you have to hope that the money you've been paying into it is going to, work for you. And in many cases, in the case of United Healthcare, they deny the most claims out of any private insurance company at 32%. So just think of how many people those kinds of decisions have directly impacted, denying people the healthcare that they need when they've been paying into it. Their money's already spent and they can't get the healthcare that they've been paying into. Like it is insane to have a profit motive at the heart of healthcare. Something that everybody needs. We all need it at some point in our lives. We all need healthcare. To have a profit motive at the heart of that, to have that be the reason for these healthcare companies to operate, that their priority is profit, not people's health. It is profit. That's a completely insane system. Now, last thing here, I think it's just, I don't know, it's worth just noting that, as I discussed in previous video, Mangione had reviewed the Unabomber's Manifesto, gave it 4 stars, and sort of excused his thought process. But apparently, the idea to read the manifesto was part of the book club that he was in Hawaii, and it was his roommate that proposed that.
I mentioned that one of the great ways he contributed to the surf break community was by spearheading a book club. And he presented a bunch of interesting books to read. I think we started with Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. And a few texts in, I actually proposed that we read, it's kind of half joke, but read the Unabomber Manifesto. I always wanted to read it, but never got around to it. So that was my suggestion. We had a normal discussion, debate around it. Nothing that stood out at the time, no anger, no a special affinity towards it, just, thought-provoking discussion.
You suggested reading Ted Kaczynski's book. Why? Why were you interested in that?
I have an academic background, and I really enjoy reading just about anything, different perspectives, right, left, middle, progressive, things about ancients, the future, and wanted to understand a little bit more about what he wrote, why he wrote it, and maybe some historical context around that.
All right. So his friend suggested reading that. Now, I want to be clear. The friend deserves no blame. Millions, not millions, but I'm sure a lot of people have read that manifesto, and they don't imitate him. But it is interesting that as at least partially has to be somewhat an influence there in terms of his review of the book and agreeing with a lot of what was said in it. But again, this gets back to what I think the real discussion should be coming out of this, and that is the healthcare industry, the fact that for-profit healthcare, the idea of it just generally is insane, and there should be a continued discussion around that and moving towards a single payer or some kind of real universal system where healthcare is guaranteed to everyone.